Cedar Mills, Iowa wasn't the kind of place you locked your doors at night. Most folks still left keys under flower pots or inside mailboxes, a habit passed down from their parents and grandparents. It was the kind of town where if you didn't wave when you passed someone on the street, they'd talk about it over pie at the diner. The river ran slow and wide on the town's edge, the grain silos loomed silver in the sun, and the same families had lived on the same streets for decades. You didn't expect strangers here. And you didn't expect evil to come from the boy you'd known since you were 12. Emily Harris first met Daniel Brooks in the fall of 1998, the year their middle school decided to combine the boys' and girls' PE classes. She was tall for her age, quiet, a little awkward, with hair the color of corn silk and a smile she mostly kept to herself. He was the opposite. Loud, confident, the kind of boy who could throw a football clear across the field and make it look easy. They paired up for a softball drill, and when Daniel teased her about how she held the bat, she laughed, not the embarrassed kind of laugh, but the kind that felt like the start of something. Through high school they were inseparable. She sat in the front row at his football games, wearing his Letterman jacket on chilly nights. He took her to prom in a rented tux, hair slicked back, grinning in every photo like he'd already won the best prize in town. Everyone thought they'd marry right out of high school, but Emily had other plans, a teaching degree at Iowa State. Daniel stayed behind, working odd construction jobs, spending weekends hunting and fishing with friends. They kept in touch, sometimes going weeks without talking, but neither dated anyone else. When Emily came back to Cedar Mills 4 years later, Daniel was waiting. He'd grown into his broad shoulders, his boyish face harder now, but the way he looked at her, like she was the only thing in the room, hadn't changed. Within 6 months they were engaged. He proposed in the little park behind the library where they'd first kissed. She said yes without a second's hesitation. Their wedding the next spring was straight out of a Hallmark movie. White gazebo, wildflowers in mason jars, her in lace, him in a gray vest and boots polished to a mirror shine. Neighbors brought casseroles and pies to the reception. The pastor's wife said it was the happiest she'd seen the whole town in years. For a while it was. They bought a small white clapboard house on Maple Street with a porch swing and a patch of garden Emily filled with tulips. She took a job teaching kindergarten. Daniel worked at the lumber yard. They hosted barbecues, went to church, waved to passers-by from their porch in the summer evenings. People used words like perfect and meant to be when they talked about them. But perfection doesn't rot all at once. It spoils in spots, slowly, quietly, until the whole thing is bad. Daniel's control began in ways Emily could explain away. He didn't like a certain friend of hers, thought she was a bad influence. He preferred she not wear dresses that were too short or too low. He'd call if she was 5 minutes late from the store. He told her it was because he cared. She believed him. By their second anniversary, he'd convinced her to quit her Thursday night book club. "We barely see each other as it is," he said, kissing her hair. "Why waste the time?" By their third, he'd started getting angry if she spent too long talking to her sister, Claire, on the phone. He made little jokes about how she'd be lost without him, how no one else would put up with her quirks. She laughed along until she didn't. In public they still looked happy. In private, Emily was learning to measure her words to keep the peace. The arguments could last hours, looping in circles until she forgot what had started them. Sometimes he'd go silent for days, slamming cabinet doors, watching her with a cold expression that made her skin crawl. The first bruise came after a fight about money. He gripped her arm hard enough to leave a dark print for a week. He cried afterward, promised it would never happen again. It did. By the spring of their 5th year, Daniel had lost his job at the lumber yard after shoving a manager who'd told him to take a longer lunch break. Emily picked up extra hours tutoring after school to keep the bills paid. Daniel resented it. "You think you're the man of the house now?" he sneered one night, knocking her plate to the floor. She started hiding small amounts of cash in an envelope inside her sewing kit, not even sure yet what she'd do with it, only that she needed a way out if it came to that. Daniel found it in June. On the night of July 6th, neighbors saw the couple on their porch swing at dusk. Emily waved to Mrs. Talbot next door, smiling in that easy, practiced way she'd perfected. By 9 the blinds were drawn, the house dark. At 10:15 p.m., Mrs. Talbot heard a loud thump from inside, then nothing. Emily didn't show up for work the next day. Claire called her 3 times with no answer. By afternoon she was at the police station asking for a welfare check. Officer Travis McNeil and his partner arrived at 2:17 p.m. The spare key Claire brought turned easily in the lock. The air inside was hot, heavy. The kitchen table was set for 2, dishes crusted with food. A faint smell of gasoline lingered in the hallway. The living room lamp lay shattered on the carpet. In the bedroom, Emily was on the bed, head turned slightly, hair spread on the pillow like she was sleeping, except for the dark bruise around her throat. Her wedding ring was gone. Daniel was nowhere in the house. Detective Laura Whitmore was called in from home. 15 years on the force had taught her to read a scene fast, and something about this one felt wrong. It was too clean in the wrong places, she said later. You could tell someone had tried to control what we saw. The autopsy confirmed manual strangulation between 9 p.m. and midnight. No alcohol, no drugs. This wasn't an accident and it wasn't self-inflicted. This was murder. Ebola went out for Daniel Brooks. His truck was found 3 days later at a rest stop near the Missouri border. In the bed was an empty gas can and a partially burned shoebox filled with photos of Emily, most of them torn in half. A truck driver came forward saying he'd given a man matching Daniel's description a ride to an old hunting cabin in the Mark Twain National Forest. At dawn, SWAT surrounded the cabin. Daniel was inside, sitting at a table with a revolver in front of him. He surrendered without a word. In interrogation he was calm, almost pleasant. He claimed they'd argued that Emily had tried to leave, that he'd just lost it. When Whitmore pressed him about the shoebox, his tone shifted. "She was mine since we were kids," he said. "You don't just walk away from that." At trial, the prosecution laid out a clear pattern of control and escalating violence, backed by testimony from Claire, Sharon, and neighbors who'd overheard fights. They showed the jury Emily's hidden cache, the bruises photographed by a friend weeks before her death, the torn photos. The defense argued for a crime of passion, saying Daniel had snapped in the heat of an argument. The jury didn't buy it. 4 hours of deliberation ended with a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. Life without parole. Cedar Mills never really recovered. The porch swing on Maple Street stayed still, the tulip beds grew wild. Emily's classroom got a new teacher, but her photo stayed on the wall. Claire visited the grave every Sunday, sometimes leaving a folded note under the flowers. Sharon kept Emily's favorite coffee mug at her desk. Detective Whitmore still drives past the house sometimes. "People think time lets you know someone better," she says. "But there are parts of a person you'll never see until it's too late." One October night, 3 years after the trial, Whitmore was locking up the station when she saw a figure across the street, tall, broad-shouldered, standing in the shadow of the old post office. For a second, her gut clenched, heart thudding the way it had the morning she'd walked into that bedroom. She knew it wasn't Daniel. He was in a concrete cell 200 miles away. But something about the way the man watched her, motionless, made her skin go cold. She turned, locked the door, and when she looked back, the shadow was gone. In Cedar Mills, folks still say goodnight with unlocked doors. But some have started keeping the blinds closed. Not because of strangers. Because sometimes the devil you should have feared is the one you've known all your life.